with no surprise, seeing your eyes, serene blue of the lake.
K-Squid 90.7 FM, streaming live at ksqd.org. I am Catherine Bell, and welcome to the Dream Journal, a weekly show where we explore the healing powers of your nighttime dreams through conversations with dream experts and with you. In the words of Carl Jung, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. Today's music is called Preternaturalize. Preternaturalize. And you can find the music at narrativespecies.com. Did COVID change the way you dream? Today we will talk about the 9,000 pandemic dreams collected by Harvard researcher Dr. Deirdre Barrett and what they say about how we respond to crisis. This is Catherine Bell of Experiential Dreamwork, and welcome to the Dream Journal. The Dream Journal is also a podcast, so you can look for that in all of your regular podcast places, and also on the KSQD website at ksqd.org/the-dream-journal. So look for the Dream Journal, review it, subscribe, and tell a friend. It gives you a chance to talk about your dreams. Isn't that what you wanted to do anyway? Dreams are kind of made to be talked about, so tell them about the podcast you're listening to, and tell them about your dreams. So I'm going to tell you about a dream I had just a few days ago. And there's so much, but the moment that I'm curious about is that I have found this book. It looks a lot like a photo album that I know from Waking Life, but it is not just photos. And in fact, it's full of videos, and I can hear these voices and see these images of things that I don't remember. Yet it's clearly me in the pictures, little me, like as a childhood me. So it's interesting to notice this is what my dreams are offering. And then I try to turn the volume down because I don't understand what is going on. And I can't. So there's just this whispering in the background, whispering of memories, but memories that I don't remember, which is kind of an interesting paradox. So I'm mulling that over and wondering if dreams themselves really do kind of reflect back to us memories that we don't remember. And there were happy images, and so there were also sad images. But maybe the dreams are kind of the placeholders of all those different things that we go through. So we will be taking call-ins during the last 20 minutes of the show, or you can also email us at any time at onair@ksqd.org. So I want to say hello to Dr. Deirdre Barrett. Deirdre Barrett, Ph.D., is a psychologist on the faculty of Harvard, where she teaches on dreams and hypnosis. She is past president of both the International Association for the Study of Dreams and the Society for Psychological Hypnosis. She has written 5 books, including, most recently, Pandemic Dreams, also The Committee of Sleep and The Pregnant Man. She has also edited 4 books, including Trauma and Dreams. She is editor-in-chief of the international journal Dreaming. Dr. Barrett has published dozens of academic articles and chapters. Her current work focuses on dreams and creative problem-solving, lucid dreaming, and dreams about the COVID-19 pandemic. You can find out about her work at deirdrebarrett.com. That's DeirdreBarrett.com. So welcome, Dr. Barrett.
Hi.
Hi. So I'm so glad to have you on the show. And I must say about a year ago when your Pandemic Dreams book first released, I was hearing you all over the place. You were on NPR, you were on the New York Times. It seemed like everybody was interested in what Dr. Barrett had to say about dreaming. But before we get into that, I want to ask you a little bit about what first inspired you to get started with dreams.
Well, I had very vivid dreams myself my entire life. So as a child, I had even more vivid recall for sort of long adventures every night. So I think that my interest in dreams just goes back as far as I can remember. Mm-hmm. And most other psychologists I know tend to have gone into psychology and then somewhere in graduate school, they picked a specialty. But mine was the other way around. It was like I was just more interested in dreams than anything else. as a child. And so by the time I got to high school, I kind of knew that meant I should go to college as a psychology major and go to graduate school if I wanted people to pay me to study dreams for the rest of my life.
Right. It was interesting that you were so clear so early that that dreaming was something that you wanted to study, since and certainly in my experience, there wasn't a lot of talk about dreams growing up. Did you have an environment like in your home or in school where talking about dreams was done?
I think it was maybe sort of average. I definitely did not encounter any sort of negative, dismissive of dream things from my immediate family or my environment. But my father actually recalled much fewer than average. My mother recalled a number of dreams and was recounting them. But it wasn't like my whole community was terribly enthusiastic about dreams, but they were at least just a nice, curious, interested group of kids that I went to school with. And so those of us that had more dream recall and were more entranced with dreams would find each other. And so I certainly had people to talk to about dreams, and the library had a few of the standard dream books. I checked them all out at an early age.
Absolutely. I kind of know that. Certainly went through all the mythology books I could find, all the fairy tales and the dreams. There wasn't that much in some of my my elementary school libraries, for sure, or even high school. So what was your next step? So what did you study in college, and then where did you go from there?
I majored in psychology, and I took as many of the kind of clinical and personality courses within psychology, has courses that are about what a ferret brain is doing in processing visual input. So I was taking the things that people probably most typically think of as psychology. And there were no courses specifically on dreams as either an undergraduate or graduate student, but because sort of psychoanalytic ideas were still more popular than they are now, and yet the humanistic movement had also started many courses in psychology on personality or psychotherapy or whatever, definitely mentioned dreams, probably more than they would now. And I both went to a graduate school and an internship that had someone specializing in hypnosis, because if there wasn't a hypnosis person and a hypnosis course at a school, hypnosis would not get mentioned at all. And that was my kind of secondary interest. But dreams were somewhat integrated in a standard clinical psychology program, and not like a huge amount of exposure, but enough that when I was picking the topic for a class term paper or when I was picking my dissertation topic, I could do something on dreams.
It's interesting that you say that probably you got more research, more information about dreams than people are getting now. It's just not, they're just not studying that much about dreams in psychology these days. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think it's less automatically included in personality and clinical courses than it was then. Because like I say, that was psychoanalysis was on the wane. Humanistic psychology was in its heyday. And it was just before behavioral psychology became quite as big, and completely before cognitive behavioral became the mainstream approach in clinical. And there are a couple of people who write some interesting things about dreams from a cognitive therapy perspective, but it's not standardly taught when focusing on that approach.
Well, it reminds me a little bit of the current practice in medicine, where doctors receive hardly any information all about nutrition, and yet that is so important to health. And similarly, psychologists receive little information about dreams, and that's sort of the innate route to health. So I wonder if you have any personal dreams that you were comfortable sharing with us that have significant for you along the way, in your career or making choices along the way. If you have something you'd like to share.
Let's see. I'll do one sort of basic one that's most directly an answer to your question, and then I'd like to share at some point in the broadcast a couple of my dreams about the pandemic, because they motivated me to do my most recent research project. But one dream that had a big impact on me, and not necessarily in a direction I'd advocate for everyone, but when I was just out of graduate school, and I was keeping a dream journal, and I naturally recall dream content every night, but maybe like 2 dreams in not a huge amount of detail would be my most typical night when I'm not doing anything toward enhancing recall or journaling. But after I got out of graduate school, I felt like I had a little more time. I was keeping a complete dream journal, and I got to where I was recalling like 5 detailed dreams every night.
Oh, wow.
And I also had a hospital job where I had to be at morning report at 8 in the morning, and I'm not a morning person. So I was getting up earlier and earlier and writing to get these dreams down. And this was before word processing, so this was a handwritten dream journal.
Oh, gosh.
And I really, I mean, in a way, I was excited that I had the time to get every dream down, and I kind of liked that I was getting more dream recall, but it was actually interfering with other things.
Right.
And I had a dream where I sort of descended from the sky. There wasn't a clear spaceship that I was in, but it was a little bit like I was being beamed down by a spaceship, or I was in an invisible spaceship. I had sort of traveled to this place, and it was like a little planet I saw as I came down, bigger than the Little Princes, but a bit like that. And once I was down, it was kind of this fairy tale land with beautiful spired buildings in the background, and lovely streams and fairy tale forests, and this kind of biblical wise man. He looked almost like Jung's Philemon without the wings. Just classic robed elderly white guy, wise man. And he approached me, and he said that I was welcome in this land, and that I could travel anywhere I wanted. And then this kind of snickery, amused expression came across his face, and he said, "But I don't think you'll get far with that." And he pointed at my arm, and I had this huge metal arm cuff and chain coming off it that was attached to this huge stone tablet inscribed with hieroglyphics. And I was apparently had been sort of dragging this thing around attached to my arm, only it was really like bigger than you could move anywhere with that attached to you. And he was just kind of gently laughing at me for having this thing attached to my arm. And I felt kind of confused because I wanted to explore, and I was kind of surprised that I had this thing holding me back. And I woke up, and I thought about the stone tablet, and it was, even though it was stone and huge, it was also round and flat and sort of shaped like a phonograph record. So also being inscribed with hieroglyphics, I thought it was my dream record or dream journal. That I was lugging through this landscape with me. And I took that as permission to, or direction to, stop writing down every single bit of recalled dream content. And I'm glad I have that complete journal from that just matter of a number of weeks after getting out of graduate school. But it really felt right for me to stop that. And ever since, I've kept a dream journal where I just write down what I consider big dreams by different criteria, like the ones that feel the most psychologically important, the kind of vivid peak experiences ones, almost any lucid dream makes it in my journal. But I really felt like my dream was telling me that for me, that much detailed journaling was getting in the way of the experience. And once I stopped, I I had more time to like think about the dreams and do dream work on the dreams rather than just writing these pages and pages. So that's not advice for everyone, but it was, I think for me, very good advice.
Well, I think that's wonderful. And I love how that was a very specific direction from the dream, which made sense to you in waking life, and that there was an intuitive connection with your dream journal, and that it could have been like any number of things, but you trusted your intuition that this disc that was weighing you down was your dream journal. It could have been any number of things in your external life that was weighing you down. And I actually do occasionally, sometimes if people are having recurring dreams and, we've worked with them various ways and they just seem kind of obdurate, and even with nightmares, that there is a strategy for dream forgetting. Sometimes it's useful to say, okay, no, not that one. Nope, I'm just going to let that one go and just trust it's going to come around again in a way that I can handle it. And it's in a way that I'll be inspired to write it down. So there is some value to dream forgetting, even in the more difficult circumstance. But even as you choose, you talked about what dreams you do write down. Must be a great deal of intuition involved in, oh, this is a big dream, or this is one I'm going to let go.
Yes, and I mean the ones that strike me in a way I want to write them down. They're not all similar to each other. Sometimes it's like if any long ago deceased loved one shows up in a dream, right. That's just a powerful experience that I want to kind of record and save. And if a dream seems kind of symbolic and there's some hints it's related to some big issue for me, but it's not one of those where I just wake up and feel like I understand what it means. I want to write it down so I don't lose details and I can do some formal dream work on it. And some are they're just like you might write in a travel journal or something. They're just, I was in this awesome place and it was wonderful, or I discovered this new way of flying and boy, was this fun. So some of them are just capturing a really fun experience that I'm not necessarily going to interpret much, and others are the ones I want to interpret. And then I much more recently, I started making art from my dreams. And those are consistently the dreams where it is the visual experience of the dream that is the most striking thing. And some of those I interpret also, but some of those I just want to capture weird creatures or some humanoid entity that was striking in appearance, or really magical, beautiful architecture in a dream. So sometimes I make some notes about those, but those I now am very eager to turn into artworks.
All right, I went to your webpage and saw some of that beautiful art that you're talking about. So I want to take a quick break. This is Dr. Deirdre Barrett, and you are listening to The Dream Journal. My name is Catherine Bell, and you are listening to The Squid. K-Squid 90.7 FM, streaming live at ksqd.org. We'll be right back to talk about pandemic dreams. Okay, this is The Dream Journal, and my name is Catherine Bell. You're listening to K-Squid 90.7 FM, streaming live at ksqd.org. My guest today is Harvard researcher Dr. Deirdre Barrett. So Deirdre, I want to talk about pandemic dreams. This is your recent book that came out. What inspired you to study the dreams people have during the pandemic, and maybe tell us a little bit about what you found.
Well, just in March, as the pandemic descended, March of 2020, as the pandemic descended, I had been just planning on starting a dream research project that was going to involve passing around some home monitoring devices that one wore while one slept. And if you remember, at the start of the pandemic, they thought everything was spread by surface contact.
Yes, that was
so, and we were scrubbing everything,
Yes.
and these devices were not scrubbable. So the idea even of meeting with people to give them the device and show them how it worked was kind of not something a human subjects committee was suddenly going to allow anymore. But cleaning the devices was like an impossible. So my planned research project was just shelved for quite some time. So I had a couple of really dramatic dreams about the pandemic in that first, like around March 15th and one around March 20th to 23rd, kind of just at the first one was as we knew it was coming, but really nothing was being done in America yet. And then the second one was when everybody was raiding grocery stores and starting to lock down and figuring out how to use Zoom and that kind of thing. And actually, they proved to be very untypical dreams from what I then started gathering from other people. But I was even struck when I had them that I was in a kind of safe, privileged position. And the first dream was that I was in this like beautiful library, like of a private home centuries back. And it was sort of golden lamp-lit lighting and all these old leather-bound volumes and just this sort of idyllic, little place of knowledge in a private library. And I was just enjoying being in the space and being with the books. I wasn't actively reading a particular book, but I was aware that there was something going on outside. The drapes were shut, so I wasn't seeing outside, but I knew I could hear some noises, and somehow I knew that something awful had started happening to the world. And at times it seemed like it was riots, and at other times it seemed to be a war. But then it more and more seemed like it was the Black Plague, sort of like I was in Europe in the time of the Great Plague. But I just knew that something horrific was going on right outside the windows. And at first it was like just a little sense of that, still mostly enjoying the library I was in. But as the dream went on, I was less and less able to enjoy the library and more aware that just like horror was going on outside. But atypically, I still felt kind of safe in an idyllic space and just worried for the world. And that one was dreamed kind of before it was really in America in any amount, but we kind of knew it was coming, and it was already affecting Asia and some other areas. And then my second dream was that after I had been on my frantic grocery shopping trip, and I was teaching a class at Harvard that had already announced that we were going to be switching to Zoom and had been sending us information about how to use Zoom. And so I had this dream where I had to go outside, and I had been making these forays for groceries and things. And I knew the air was toxic. It was not quite literally COVID, but it was more like there was a toxic gas in the air. And I had to take my cat with me. And so I was trying to put this old-fashioned, like World War I looking gas mask over his head. And when I'm trying to make my cat take a pill or do anything that's for his own good, he's always fighting me. And so in the dream, I'm trying to pull the gas mask sort of had a shouldery hoodie thing beneath the mask. So I went over his whole head. I was trying to pull it down, and he was like wriggling and fighting and acting like I was doing something bad to him. And I was feeling extremely anxious because I had to go take us out very soon, and I wasn't getting the mask on him, and the air was toxic. And then right at the end of the dream, I got the mask on him, and I think I had a mask on myself, but that was not very featured. And I picked him up under one arm. He's a huge cat, but that's the way I carry him if I have to have one arm free. I kind of sling him over my stronger arm. and I was heading out, and I had this sense, not like, oh, now everything's wonderful, but kind of like, okay, now I think it's going to be all right. I've got the hood on him. I think we're going to be okay. Still like anxious, but much less so than through most of the dream. And I woke up, and I reflected on, he's sort of a helpless creature who relies on me for all his needs. But I was teaching at Harvard Medical School to psychiatry residents and some psychology interns. And the psychology trainees were getting told just what I was, that they were going to stop coming in. They were going to stay home and do everything over Zoom, including their sessions with clients, as well as their courses would be over Zoom. But the psychiatry residents were not only expected to still come in some, but they were getting some of their unused hours in psychiatry reassigned to do COVID evals in the emergency room.
Oh, boy.
So my students were suddenly facing, this really scary, this was before any vaccines, and it was before they'd figured out sort of what PPE was most effective, and all of a sudden they were going to be the first people to encounter the virus. So I think that my dreams were both about knowing I was unusually able to stay safe and very concerned in the first dream more about the world. And in the second dream, I think my cat was kind of standing in for my psychiatry residents who I felt like I needed to protect. And yet in waking life, I couldn't put a gas mask on them or do anything to help them, but I wanted to. So I had those dreams in, like I say, like as early as we knew it was coming. And so then it was around the time of the second dream. And I definitely remember that as within a day or two of like that, everybody running to the grocery store because we were afraid they were going to close, and just ceasing to go out of our homes, that I decided that, if I was dreaming about it, everybody must be dreaming about it. And I'd done past studies of, I was in Kuwait right after the first Gulf War and collected dreams about that. I collected dreams after 9/11. And I edited a book called Trauma and Dreams that was kind of all kinds of researchers' studies of crisis and trauma dreaming. So I was already very interested in trauma dreams and crisis dreams. And so I got a survey up very quickly online. And, I knew that online, anything I'd done before, it's easy to collect hundreds of dreams as opposed to when we used to use the undergraduate subject pool or something as our main group to study. They weren't very varied, and you might get allowed to use 100 at most as your assignment for that semester. And similarly, even just in sort of posting requests for people to fill out surveys in other ways, you get modest numbers. I knew I would get hundreds, but I was really thinking hundreds. So I put this survey up. And it was only in English, but other than that, the web allows from anywhere. And I asked country on the survey. And then very soon I started getting calls from journalists wanting, because of my past research on trauma dreaming, they didn't know I had the survey up, but they thought, based on my 9/11 research, I might want to comment on what people are probably dreaming about COVID, and I would tell them about the survey. So I was doing interviews by the start of April about COVID dreams, just because I was already a kind of high-profile dream researcher who'd done some trauma stuff. But on almost all of those shows that, like national shows, were putting the link to the survey. And so there was one New York Times article where I got 1,000 dreams in the 12 hours after that article.
Wow, 1,000 dreams in 12.
Yes.
Okay.
So it definitely biased the sample. I mean, the pluses of web surveys are they can be around the world. You get huge numbers, but really any way you can advertise web surveys, but especially when it was in the media, I kind of got a more educated than average. I also noticed I got a more liberal than average, like politicians and how they were dealing with what were showing up in these dreams. And I didn't get a single positive dream about Donald Trump. I got Trump monster dreams. And there may be some lack of overlap between the people most interested in dreams and people who like Donald Trump.
Right, maybe.
But I think it was also that, this was NPR, this was the New York Times, and around the world, I have answers from 83 countries, but I have more from the US than anywhere, second most in Britain, third most Australia, right. And in countries outside the English speaking world, I have only people who have pretty good English as a second language, but it's 15,000 dreams now.
15,000.
Yes,
okay.
I read every single dream early on in the survey. Yeah, early on in the survey, I was sometimes reading 6 hours at a time. Currently, I can log on and every 4 or 5 days and catch up in 15 minutes of reading them. I just have several coming in typically now. I am continuing it, but early on there were lots and lots of dreams, and it was really fascinating to watch like the themes that I noticed at first. None of them disappeared, they all continued, but then there were definitely ones that showed up at different points through time. Like dreams dreams about having a mask on or not having a mask on properly. Mm-hmm. Those only came in from Asia, not just China where the virus was, but some of the other Asian countries anticipating the virus coming at them were dreaming about masking because that was just an automatic mandate in any Asian country early on. But here we were concentrating on scrubbing surfaces, and they were saying only my trainees are mental health professionals, only health professionals, needed to be masking up, and they were emphasizing surface contact. So I didn't see any mask dreams from the US or Europe in the first few weeks, but immediately the Asian ones were like, I've forgotten my mask has fallen off, my mask has like magically turned into some insect or bird and flown off my face, or about equal numbers of something's wrong with my mask and equal numbers of I'm out in public and no one has their mask on, or there's this one person who doesn't have a mask or has a mask with holes in it, or his mask flies off his face. It was that they turned into animals and moved away. They didn't all fly, but that, being a dream, things that could go wrong with your mask included that it flew away from you or walked away from you.
You must have done a huge amount of statistical analysis of these different themes. I mean, 15,000 dreams. How could you even, trust your own biases or whatever as you were reading these dreams?
Well, for the book, I really focused on my own just kind of close read, and I read all the way through and sort of identified what I considered some of the main frequent themes. And then I ran just text searches through, like for references to masks, which, like I say, they were there from the start in Asia. Something's wrong with my mask or somebody else is not masking. And within weeks, those started showing up as a common thing in the US and Europe as we got told to put on face masks. And then and it was just like if you or someone else didn't have a mask on, that was just completely terrifying, was the theme for pretty much the first year until the vaccine was around. But then I begin to see a few, and eventually now about half the dreams about I've forgotten my mask, or my mask has slipped, or my mask runs away from me. about half of those now, the feeling is not terror anymore, but for about half of them, it's social shame. It's like the new I'm naked in public.
Oh,
I suddenly look down and realize I forgot to put my pants on today. It's like I suddenly realize I'm not wearing my mask. And in the early version of this, which still continues, there's still definitely some of the terrified ones you realize you don't have your mask. But the early version is like terror. You want to get away from the place you're in because you might catch COVID. You maybe try to cover your face, but it's just a sort of makeshift barrier, like the mask would serve. But now in the ones that are now about 50% of them, where the person immediately feels embarrassed that they've forgotten this and starts worrying what people are thinking of me. And sometimes it's like the naked in public where you stroll you notice you don't have any clothes on in the mall, and you decide that if you just stroll really nonchalantly, no one will notice that you don't have clothes on, rather than you run out in terror, which happens some. So some of the mask ones are just, if I try to act casual, people won't notice as long as I'm sort of willing them not to notice. In others, people are staring shocked at them. And now if they try to cover their face, it's not as a makeshift barrier for the virus. It's to hide that they don't have a mask on, is why they put something else in front of their mouth and nose.
So interesting. It's turned into a social issue. And certainly that's true in waking life, that mask or not mask has really become a social issue. Certainly, I guess it's changing even now. I'm sure that theme is changing in the dreams that you're reading. But certainly in my waking life experience, there was a long period, 6 months or a year even, where it was sort of more of a social decision than fear.
Yes, and even though it made the most sense back maybe 9 months ago when most public places, at least in the Northeast where I am, were mandating masks indoors, and most people were choosing to wear masks. That's when I started seeing that's when the social shame ones really hit 50%. But although dreams about masks have become slightly less common over the last 6 months, they certainly haven't gone away. And they definitely, I still see some terror ones. I don't have my mask on. I'm terrified, but I also see the social shame ones. But what's odd is I'm seeing them coming from areas where most people are not actually still wearing masks. So I would sort of predict that although they're going to get less and less common, that, oh my God, I've forgotten my mask dream, both the scary version and the social shame version will be something that we're dreaming some 10 and 15 years from now. If COVID dies down as fast as we hope it will, it will never leave our dreamscape.
That's it. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I'd love to hear about the evolution of that theme. So I want to take another short break and open up the phones. We are available for call-ins. The number is 831-900-5773. If you have a dream you'd like to share or an experience around a pandemic or any questions for Dr. Barrett or myself, you can call in 831-900-5773. You can also check send an email at onair, ONAIR, at ksqd.org if you would like to communicate that way. So you're listening to The Dream Journal. My name is Catherine Bell. Our guest today is Dr. Deirdre Barrett, and this is The Squid, K-Squid 90.7 FM, Santa Cruz, streaming live at ksqd.org. Okay, this is The Dream Journal. My name is Catherine Bell. Our guest today is Dr. Deirdre Barrett, and this phone lines are now open. The number to call is 831-900-5773. Welcome to give us a call if you want to ask a question or share a pandemic dream. So my guest today is Dr. Deirdre Barrett, who is a Harvard professor, and the topic is pandemic dreams. So, Dr. Barrett, I'm wondering, you say that you've done a lot having to do with other kinds of crises and dreams, and I wonder if you have some thoughts, and also trauma and dreams, of how the dreams are actually helping us evolve through these situations. Are there themes in common in these different situations? You mentioned Kuwait and 9/11, and then, of course, the pandemic, and I wonder if you have some thoughts about how dreams are working behind the scenes.
Some of the themes in common across everything I collected, including pandemic dreams, is that first of all, if you just do text analysis for references to anxiety and fear and so on, they jump up to about double dreams in more peaceful times. So dreams become very fearful. The most typical dream for someone, like I collected dreams from Americans after 9/11 had happened, and only a few from people who were a block away from where the planes were hitting or the bodies were falling out of the buildings. So people who've had hideous traumas have some very distinctive post-traumatic stress dreams that just reenact the trauma over and over. Right. But most people just have a general increase in anxiety, and they have some nightmares that sometimes have the content of the trauma, but sometimes they're more metaphoric, but they're still more prone to nightmares right then. But the most typical dream in my pandemic survey and in past groups is just, it's better characterized as an anxiety dream. But the ones that are very common across types of crises are that they're often dreams about the crisis itself, but it'll sort of have a magical dreamlike component to it, or something that the dreamer was afraid was almost about to happen, but it didn't happen to them, it happened to someone else, or they were afraid it was going to happen to them, but it didn't actually, will actually act out in the dream. So they'll dream that something happens to them that they've only seen on television, befalling someone more directly involved in the crisis. So there's some pretty literal ones. But then in any crisis, you see an uptick in dreams about natural disasters. Tsunamis are coming at the dreamer. There's a tornado on the horizon. They're in the midst of a hurricane. A wildfire is breaking out. And it just seems like we're more evolutionarily programmed to fear certain things that have happened, through all human time. And so when we get revved up to that level of anxiety, that images about those things that we're more primally, instinctively afraid of, jump in to kind of substitute for the 9/11 building hits or the pandemic virus. And I found that was possibly even more true, that there were more substitute images, especially early in the pandemic. And I think that was because, like, 9/11 had such obvious visual images to go with the terror. The planes striking the buildings, the guys with box cutters, sort of are tied into primal fears. Whereas invisible virus that's going to get in your body and do kind of unspecified bad things to you. I think later we had more images of these, like cold storage trucks with bodies piling up in them, and things that were creepy, real images. But at first it was like this invisible menace that the main issue was you didn't quite see it coming or know how to defend against it. So I saw all the usual natural disaster tsunami dreams that I do with any crisis, but I also saw some that seemed to be specifically about this invisibility or difficulty in spotting, because there were a real cluster of bug attack, insect attack dreams. And it could be any kind of insect, swarms of flying insects coming at the dreamer, armies of cockroaches running at them, masses of wriggling worms. Sometimes the insects were definitely poisonous and going to kill them, but other times they were just kind of horrible and creepy and disgusting and scary in some unnamed way. And I think that's both because we use the slang term bug to mean both, a viral infection and an insect. And dreams often use puns like that. I'm sure you've talked about that issue before. But the other thing is, I think it's why that sort of pun-like slang term of bug exists, is that lots and lots of little bitty things that cumulatively could harm or kill you make insects a very good metaphor for the viral particles when we don't have a good visual image of that. So I saw lots of bug attack dreams, and they've lessened a little, but they have continued to this day. And then the other one specific to the pandemic that I hadn't seen in previous crises was invisible monsters. After 9/11 and various other traumas, there's a certain number of dreams where some monster is chasing you or it's lurking out there, and it kind of symbolically seems to have to do with the trauma that's happened. But in this, there were a number of ones where they knew that there were invisible monsters. And if you went outside, you knew the monsters could jump on you and kill you, but you couldn't see them. Or there were variations on, there was one dream where you couldn't see the monsters, but you could hear their footsteps behind you. And another one where they were invisible, but they cast shadows on the wall where the dreamer was walking. And the most striking one was one where the dreamer was outside talking to several friends, and they knew there were invisible monsters around. And one by one, her friends were getting knocked to the ground, and she knew that was because a monster jumped on them, but she'd just see them fall to the ground, and they'd start to get these hideous bite marks all over them without seeing the creature causing them, until they died of these. Right. And then she knew that the monster could jump up to 6 feet. And so it would jump on another person who would fall to the ground and begin to die from these bites. And this was when they were telling us to stay 6 feet apart. Or the virus can be when they really thought it couldn't travel more than 6 feet. So, and anyway, so the monster jumps on her at the end. She feels the monster sort of landing on her at the end of the dream. So
this may be a little beyond your usual role as a researcher, where you're kind of cataloging these different kinds of dreams. But I'm curious what you're thinking about what these dreams are doing for us. Now, it helps us, like if we're upset about something, to talk about something with a friend, it can be emotionally calming to talk to somebody. I'm also thinking of the dream I shared at the top of the hour, where my memories are, even the memories I don't remember, are kind of talking to me. Is that what dreams are doing? Are they kind of talking to us in our sleep? Or do you have any sense of why these dreams come after disasters and what they do for us?
I do have ideas on that are probably quite different from some of my colleagues. Okay. I certainly thought that sharing dreams about the pandemic was a useful bonding thing, but it was actually the less nightmarish and definitely not the post-traumatic stress disorder ones that mostly the healthcare providers and the people who'd actually gotten and almost died of COVID were having. But the ones where dream sharing was so obviously really empathically helpful to people were the ones that were more themes about the secondary effects. I've been throwing in solitary confinement. I'm locked up all by myself. I've been told I have to be a one-person Mars colony for the rest of my life. It's supposed to be a great honor, but I don't want to go. Right. Or for the people who were sheltering with lots of roommates or extended family, the whole neighborhood's moved into my house and they've set up cots everywhere and I can't walk through my house, or I'm trying to use the toilet and I can't get the bathroom door shut because everybody's luggage is in the doorway. When people tell that, it's like, and maybe even more so the homeschooling that was so ubiquitous in the first few months of the pandemic. There was one mother who dreamed, she's really homeschooling her 10-year-old, and she dreamed that the school sent her a text that said that they were sending the entire 30 children in her kids' class to her condo, and that she was going to need to homeschool all 30 of them for the pandemic. And another woman homeschooling consisted of having to take your kids' tests for you, and she was failing middle school math, and her child was going to have a year of failure in math because she didn't homeschool properly. So when parents tell those, like, they could certainly say to another parent, God, I'm feeling so overwhelmed by homeschooling. I never had any education and instruction, and my kid doesn't respect me the way he would his teacher who he obeys. You could say that and you'd get, yeah, I feel the same way. But when you tell this sort of exaggerated, such a clear little dramatic capsule version of it in a dramatic story, the level of just immediate empathy is even stronger than if you just kind of said the waking life description of how you're feeling about it. And people hear that like the whole class is headed for my condo dream. And, there's this nervous laughter, but then people just start sharing, really the emotional side of what it's like to be homeschooling their kids. So I definitely found the sharing of dreams related to the pandemic serving a big function, and also just using standard interpretive things. There was someone who was the example subject for a little animated film about a pandemic dream that Time magazine put up on their website, and they wanted me to sort of interview the dreamer and do a little dream work. And he dreamed about being in his college home, the town he'd gone to college in that he no longer lived in. And he was wandering the streets, and all his favorite spots were closed. None of his friends were around, and he saw this tourist bar open, and he went into the tourist bar and he ordered a drink, and he was looking around at the other people in the bar, and one of them fell over and blew away. Oh. And then others, and he looked around to see how other people had responded to that, and they didn't seem to be responding much. And then one by one, they sort of fell over, and he realized they were all like two-dimensional cardboard cutouts that just blew away in the wind. And that was his dream. And when I started doing the kind of Delaney Flowers style dream interview with him, of asking him, what's a tourist bar? Well, there are these places that he wouldn't normally go to because they sort of spend all this energy making it look like really fun and like everybody's having a good time, but that's kind of very superficial and phony. And then I asked him about cardboard cutouts, and he said, well, the only life-size cardboard cutouts of people he'd ever seen were in the movie Home Alone 2. Even that name, my God. But then he further said that in that film, that the little boy is at his uncle's in the second film, left behind by his family, at his uncle's house, and these bad guys are trying to at least kidnap him, maybe murder him, and they're outside, and he wants them not to know he's alone. So he finds these cardboard cutouts of sports stars and actors, and he puts them up in the windows to look like there's a big party going on, and to pretend he's having a great time and surrounded by people to get him out of peril. The
cardboard cutouts really brought him into this whole situation, the movie.
So that's one where you don't even have to go. Is there something in your waking life that it's just the words Home Alone and and the trying to pretend like he wasn't lonely.
So this is Dr. Deirdre Barrett, and I would like to let you know that her webpage is deirdrebarrett.com, DeirdreBarrett.com. It's been so great to have you on the show, Deirdre. I'm really looking forward to seeing you in just a little over a week at the IASD conference in Tucson, where you are giving a keynote about pandemic dreams. I wonder if you have any short concluding things you'd like to share with our guests, with our listeners.
just to recommend that conference. They're still taking registrations, and it is always, if you just want to be with a few hundred people who are fascinated by dreams, hearing everything from the very scientific to a dream art show and dream performances and intensive dream workshops. It is like the event of the year on the planet.
If you feel like you've been home alone for too long, you can go to iasdconferences.org and look at the registration, or asdreams.org. Deirdre, it has been a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. And I think you put my website up on your materials, but DeirdreBarrett.com if you want to know more about any of these things I didn't get into.
Oh, we have so many things. We could talk for hours, that's for sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Barrett.
Okay, really nice being on your show.
Goodbye.
Bye.
So next week, we will be reporting live from that IASD conference in Tucson, Arizona. I'll have a series of short interviews with attendees and presenters to give you a taste of the conference. So tune in or listen live Saturday at 10 a.m. Podcast replay will be released, as always, on the Monday following the show. I'm Catherine Bell. This has been the Dream Journal. Thanks for listening. You can find out about my own dream coaching practice at experientialdreamwork.com. Email me at Catherine@ksqd.org. That's Katherine@ksqd.org. Please contact me so we can talk about dreams and so I can put you on my email list, let you know what's going on. I'd like to thank Rick Cluffel and Eva Milady. The outro music you're listening to is Everything by Mood Science, and our new intro music, which you just caught a glimpse of, is called Water Over Stones, also by Mood Science. Join me again next Saturday at 10, and when you wake up tomorrow, write down your dream and bring it to the next Dream Journal.